Hey there, Grateful Gang. Lauren here, the Gratitude Addict. Welcome to Gratefully Living the Chronic Life, where I come to you each week at this time and bring you an expert guest each week that offers something of wisdom, help, and hope to offer us through these lives of struggle. I tend to talk a lot about living with chronic pain and illness because I live with chronic pain and illness. And I run an amazing community on Facebook called Attitude of Gratitude with Chronic Pain. And I know many of you watching are from inside the community. So thank you for being here. If you don't live with chronic pain and illness, we have something to offer you as well. Most of the tips, tricks, techniques, and helps that we have, well, for me, pertain to living with chronic pain and illness. They tend to kind of go across the board and you can apply it to whatever your struggles are in life. I tend to use pain sort of in air quotes because I think we all live with some kind of pain, whether it's emotional, mental, physical, spiritual, financial, whatever. So I'm glad you're here. If it's your first time, welcome. I have an amazing guest tonight who has written, she's actually got a couple of books, including this one, Live Your Life, Not Your Diagnosis. Andrea Hanson is here with us, and I had the privilege of being interviewed by her for her podcast, also called Live Your Life, Not Your Diagnosis, a couple months back, and we really hit it off, and I couldn't wait to have her on the broadcast. So she is here with us. If it is your first time, no, I was just telling Andrea backstage that I'm a tech klutz, and I thought I just kick myself out, but nope, still here. If it is your first time, we are an interactive broadcast. I love going live. I love the raw energy and authenticness. Is that a word? Authenticity. Authenticness is not a word, but authenticity is a word. The live audience bring to our episode. So please feel free if you have any comments or questions for me, for Andrea, any thoughts that you have, we can put comments right up on the screen right there. And I love to do that. So thank you for, here's one now. Linda Edwards. Hello, Linda. Thank you for commenting. And speaking of which, something I wanted to share with you, Linda, you may recognize the shirt. For those of you who are new, I wear a gratitude shirt each week because gratitude is my jam. And Linda got me this shirt. It was my birthday last week, and Linda sent me this lovely shirt. So thank you, Linda. It is my color, as you know. It's very thoughtful. Thank you. And speaking of my birthday, for those of you that are in the group, I just want to go on the record and say thank you to all of you for offering me such beautiful birthday wishes. It was just a beautiful day and a really special day. And while I didn't get to read your comments on that day, I've been going through them over the past few days, and it was really meaningful and special to me, all the well wishes. I was definitely feeling the love. So thank you very much. What else did I want to say? Showed my shirt already. Oh, let's see who's going to be on next week. We have a returning guest next week, who's one of my favorites. Dr. Carrie Howells is going to be back. She's written a book called Untangling You. How can I be grateful when I feel so resentful? And she's going to be back there. Actually, we've gone through this book a lot, but there's still a couple things in here that we have not touched on. So she's going to be back next week at this time. And I love having her on. She's become a friend and a mentor. She's got some really great stuff to share about gratitude. If you're watching from inside the group, we are giving away, actually, Andrea is giving away a bundle of her 2 books. There's this one and her other one, which is Stop Carrying the Weight of Your MS. She's giving away a bundle of these. She's going to sign them for one lucky live viewer. If you want to win, all you have to do during the episode is write in the comments, #gratitude, anytime during the episode tonight. And then we will give away a bundle, which is so generous of her. But you have to make sure you are signed in if you're watching from inside the group, inside Attitude of Gratitude with Chronic Pain. Because we're a private group, you need to grant them permission. So you will not show up on the giveaway if you are not signed in. And if you don't know how to do that, you can watch on my YouTube channel or any of the other public outlets that I stream on. You can find out more about that. It's pinned to the featured tab at the top of the group right now if you'd like to find out my other outlets. So I want to bring on Andrea because I know I already want to have her on like 5 more times because we just have so much to talk about. And she's just, I really found like I feel like I found a soul sister when we met. But I just have to share something funny that I've talked about in the group a little bit over the past couple days because it's absolutely hilarious. So if you've been watching for a while, you know that one of my greatest pastimes with my husband, Rob, is growing our summer garden, but in particular, our heirloom tomatoes. Love heirloom tomatoes. So we were noticing a couple weeks ago that the tomatoes were okay, but our green bean patch, like something was going on. We weren't getting green beans, and we've always planted them in the same spot, and we've always had lots of green beans. So some of you know where I'm going with this, but I'd like to share with you, I have named him Grateful George. This is our green bean patch. Watch it. It goes down really quick after a minute. Watch this. He's being very dainty. Yeah, now it's all over. Here he goes. There it is. Yeah, those are my green beans. There's more. So we didn't know what was going on. Rob set up our Blink camera, and that is how we are getting such amazing footage of Grateful George. So Grateful George, the groundhog, has been gifting me with a lot of laughs. Unfortunately, no green beans, but he is very funny. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. And I'm actually doing a vlog post on my YouTube channel, kind of talking about Grateful George a little bit because, you know, we nurture our seeds, and I'm going to talk to Andrea about this tonight too. We can create the optimal environment for ourselves, and we can eat right, we can exercise, we can do whatever. In our case, we can nurture the seeds under the grow lights, we can harden them off to the outdoors, we can plant them in the best soil, and then things don't always go as planned. The more we try to control things, life laughs. And I know Andrea has talked about this a lot in her book. So without further ado, let me bring her on. Hey, Andrea.
Hi.
Thank you for being here.
Oh my God, thank you so much. I love Grateful George. We have the same thing. It's a squirrel, but it's a very naughty squirrel. And it's the same with, we have geraniums that I always plant in this one bed and they love it. And this year, nothing. And then I looked out the window and there was this little naughty squirrel, the same thing, just like, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And it broke into our hummingbird feeder, spilled like sugar water I mean, it's just naughtiness. Something's in the water this year.
I have to, I wasn't going to show another one, but this one's split second. This one shows him. So he lives under our deck. And so he's definitely making himself at home. And the reason why we know this, if you guys watch, it's really quick, but he walks by with a mouthful of twigs and leaves. Here he goes. Oh, no, wrong one. Hang on. There he goes. So he's moving into his new digs.
He's 100% moving in.
He's making himself at home. He lives in the Garden of Eden, right?
Oh my God. That's kind of cute.
Anyway, it's such a pleasure to have you here. I've been looking forward to this for months since.
Oh, me too.
I don't even remember how we met.
I think it was through, I had posted because my podcast was brand new and I had posted looking for guests, and you came in with your story and I was like, yes, 100% yes.
Yeah, we had a great interview, and
so fun.
Really, so much of what you talk about through your work. You are a life and mindset coach, certified master mindset coach, but you live with MS yourself.
I do.
And you've written a couple of books. Your podcast, I've already mentioned. You've also consulted with the board of the National Multiple Sclerosis Society. Am I right about the organization?
Yeah, I've done classes with the MS Society, with MSAA, different things like that. I'll do workshops. I did for the MS Society. I was a consultant, and I did a whole series on positive psychology and using positive psychology to help heal your body, or at least heal, like you said, heal yourself emotionally when you're dealing with a chronic illness. So yeah.
You were diagnosed pretty young,
Mhm.
right? You're 22, am I right about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was.
Can you walk
Yeah.
us through that a little bit? You know, how you got your
Sure.
diagnosis and all that?
Yeah, yeah, because it was, like, 5 years ago, it really wasn't that long ago. You know, I was in graduate school, I was getting my master's, and, in early childhood disorders, something, totally different, human development, and I was just walking down the hall and went to I was carrying a bunch of stuff, probably hustling to class or something, and I went to just brush a piece of hair out of my eye, and I poked my eye because I was doing 5 things at once, and, I'm a kind of a klutz, and I didn't really think about it. My eye was watering, and then once it stopped watering, I was like, "Okay, it'll be fine." And it was until later that evening, all of a sudden, I noticed that the vision in that eye that I poked, it was like pulling down a shade on a window, like it was just going black from the top to the bottom, and I was like, "Okay." And I, waited a day or so because I was like, maybe something happened, and then I was like, "You know what? I must have detached my retina. It must have been when I poked my eye." And so I went to the ophthalmologist. I actually drove myself, which I don't do that when you but I was young and stupid, um, and so I was like, "I could go on the freeway, it's fine." Um, and she looked at it, and I told her, I was like, I must have poked myself a lot harder than I thought, I must have a detached retina." I don't know why I thought that, like, I had no idea really what that meant either, and
Because you were young and you knew everything.
right, so,
Yeah.
it must have been that, and, she looked in my eye and was like, "Mm-mm." She's like, "This is not a detached retina." And thankfully, this is not what happens to a lot of people. I'm sure as your listeners have probably had an experience with this, but I was thankfully seeing somebody who knew, if not exactly what it was, she knew what it could be.
Mm,
And I was at like a hospital. So she literally took me like 2 doors down to a neuro-ophthalmologist who looked in my eye and he knew like, oh, this is optic neuritis, which is something very common
yeah,
that people with MS have.
yeah.
And he literally took me, like, upstairs, and they admitted me into the hospital and called the person who became my neurologist, my MS specialist, for a good 15 years.
See, the one that wrote the forward of this
He
book?
is.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes, Dr. From he's amazing.
yeah.
And that was how I got diagnosed, and I remember I was admitted to the hospital for a couple of days. I was on some massive doses of steroids to try to bring that inflammation down. And I just remember, back in that day, you would get anytime you had, I think anything, X-rays, MRIs, CAT scans, probably, there were these huge films that you put up on the wall, and you had like this light board. And
Right.
so it's
I
like,
remember them.
yeah, yeah, it's like show and tell. And I just remember looking at it and thinking, like, that's a picture of my brain and it's lit up, like, there were all these little white spots all over it, and, it's funny how you don't always hear things clearly, especially in moments like that, because what I remember is him saying, um, "You're on fire. Like, there's no doubt that I have MS or that you have MS," is what he said, but that's not the first time he didn't just, like, bust out with, "There is no doubt that you have this." Yeah. Like, he probably said it a couple of times, and I'm like, "I don't g what? I don't understand. I don't know what you're talking about." And so he finally just said, like, "You are on fire.
And
This is
the
happening."
that was plaque on your brain. That's what people with MS have,
It
right?
was yeah, they were all lesions, and so that's when I was, yeah, that's when I was diagnosed,
Is it
and
unusual to be diagnosed that young?
now, no.
Okay.
Back then, yeah, people
Yeah.
were just
5
starting to
years
get
ago.
diagnosed. Yeah, exactly. People were just starting to get but I was on the young end.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, but now I think people are catching it. Yeah, now that it's thankfully, there's more research and people know more about it, and so they're seeing it younger and younger, but most people, I think, still get diagnosed in, like, their 40s.
yeah. I thought so, but
Yeah,
I
30s and
mean,
40s.
your ophthalmologist looked at you and thought she knew what it could be. It
Mhm.
must have been like, "Wow, she's only 22 years old." Like, it
Mhm.
must have been, well, on
Yeah.
both ends, on the neurologist too, to for
Yeah.
them to see it somebody so young and vibrant. That's gotta be hard
Yeah.
for you to deal with, and I know your dad, there's a great section in
Mm.
the book where you talk about your dad and the bricks in your backpack. Do you mind talking
Yeah.
about that a little bit?
Yeah, and I'm g you know, I actually I just lost my dad,
Oh,
a
I'm
little
so
while I know, so I'm
sorry.
gonna try to
I'm
tell it
sorry.
without, like, "Oh, no, no." It's like it's almost like I feel him more now with it when I talk about it. Um, but he I was in the hospital and scared. I didn't know what was going on, and I'm sitting there and I'm hooked up to IVs and all sorts of things. So it's not even like I can get up and like pace and walk around. And he sat on my bed, and that was one of the first times I saw my dad with tears in his eyes. Like he wasn't crying, but you could tell he was composing himself and kind of fighting back the tears. He was a man of stature. He was a very um, strong archetype kind of man. And he just looked at me and he said, you're gonna be okay. This, MS is just another brick in your backpack. And that stuck with me, I mean, until now, but it really hit me because it's not that it minimized anything. It just made it, it normalized it. Or
Yeah,
I don't even know if that's the right word. It like humanized it to where it wasn't like this big, bad, crazy thing that I
right,
didn't know what was gonna happen. I didn't know how it was gonna take me down. I didn't know future. It was like, "No, you know what? It's just another brick." So it's like there's other bricks. We all have bricks in
right,
our backpacks, and this is just another one. And it's okay, you can carry it too. It's you've been carrying other stuff. There's gonna be future bricks. You can get rid of bricks. You
right. I
can
like that. I really love that analogy.
It was
It's
amazing.
you're right. And
Yeah.
instead of taking it from this like life-changing forever diagnosis
Right.
to it's another brick. I mean, it's a brick, but it
Mhm.
is another brick. And you had, I think in the book you talked about you had recently lost somebody else at that point. So you
I
had
did.
other things you were dealing with, and you said
Mhm.
that that helped you kind of put things into perspective, right?
Yeah, it did. It really did. I had just, y I guess maybe even just a year before that, had lost, a boyfriend of mine had passed away, and so I was dealing and it's interesting because, uh, looking at the research, a lot of times an autoimmune disorder or diagnosis, or I guess disorder, can present itself after something like a huge loss or grief or a huge stressful incident. And so it was interesting to look back and say, "Huh, I wonder how much that played into
I
it."
know.
But
With that book, The Body Keeps the Score. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, and Gabor Mate has another one too. I always forget. I remember the name of one book and forget the other all the time. But just
Hmm.
talking about stress and trauma and how that can often play into um, living with chronic illnesses or having them come about. Right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So what did the next? So you get diagnosed at 22.
Mhm.
What did the next couple of years look like for you? And then how did you get and how did you do this pivot and do this work that you're doing today?
I took another huge pivot before that pivot. I like a pivot. I was in school, I was halfway through my master's program, and I finished up the semester, and then I just started thinking about things, and I was like, I need to to all of a sudden going to school seemed like a luxury. I mean, because it kind of is, if you like school. I guess if you don't like school, it's not a luxury. I'm a total nerd, I love school, but all of a sudden it seemed like this luxury that I couldn't afford, and so I realized, I'm 22, like, I was gonna be no longer on my parents' insurance because back in the day, it
Mm,
was all crazy with pre-existing conditions could kick you off an insurance. And yeah, I mean, I am very grateful for how much insurance has been fixed. Even though it needs to go a little bit farther. But so I freaked out. I was like, I've got to get a job. I can't hang out and, see how this school thing plays out, because school wise, I had wanted to go on and get my PhD. So I was looking at a long time in school, and I was like, I can't do that. And so I left my program halfway through and went into finance, as one does, from early
What was it?
childhood
Early, I
disorders.
was going to say early childhood education.
Early childhood disorders, like working with like the little, like
Okay.
0 to 3,
Oh,
like little
gotcha.
kids,
Okay.
to finance, which arguably is kind of the same thing. Um, and so, but it was like the big bubble, and the 2000 bubble where finance was just going
Right.
nuts, and you could get a great paying job with not a lot of experience. And I joined,
And if
just a
you're looking for a not stressful job, finance is where you want to go, right? Yeah.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, so not stressful. Um, and so that's the thing though. So I went there. I was like, I have insurance, I'll have a good paycheck, and I'll be able to be independent. I'm not gonna have to worry about anyone. And that's what I needed at that point. I needed to have
Yeah.
something that was stable, that I could rely on. And so
I can
that's
see
where.
that though. You're 22 years old,
Mhm,
and all of a sudden life has changed as you know it. And
mhm,
yeah, I could totally see that thought process. I could, and just you're right. If money's good and insurance and all that, you really did have to think on your feet.
mhm.
Yeah.
And so as much as I hated leaving my program, and I did go back and finish it, years later,
Did you?
but yeah, I did. It was always irking me. But, I was in finance for 5 years or so, 5 or 6 years, and it was a blessing and a curse. It was a blessing because it was a stable spot for me to be. I was working in small, companies, and so they were really very understanding. I was able to leave if I needed to, take time off, do all the things I needed to do to take care of my body and do what I needed to do with my MS. Those first couple of years, my MS was just going nuts, and so I was doing a lot to get better, a lot of different therapies. But at the same time, it's just a snake pit.
Yeah.
It's it's this really hugely toxic and unhealthy, stressful environment. I mean, it really is Gordon Gekko. I mean, it's just that
Really.
movie does not. Oh, yeah, that movie does not lie. And so, yeah, and so at the same time, it was kind of contributing to what I didn't need, but it was also giving me the time and the money and the insurance to take care of what I did need to take care of. Um,
And
so
maybe shifted you to know what you don't want to do with the rest of your life. Yeah.
absolutely, it shifted
Yeah.
me to know what I didn't wanna do. But I mean, it gave me the means to be able to look into different therapies and different things that I wouldn't necessarily have been able to afford or to do. And so it was once I got to my breaking point with that, because industries fall, companies fail. There was, the huge, recession, whatever you wanna call it, um, in 2006, I wanna say. Um, and no, 2009, sorry. A and then I was like, "That's it. I'm done." I kinda started working unknowingly for a Ponzi scheme, and I was like, "That's it. Okay,
Oh,
I can't." I
wow.
know. I know. That was fun. That was so
You
much fun.
you've had a colorful life.
It was oh my gosh, finance. Holy cow, I should write a book about that. But anyway, so that was when I was like, "That's it." And I thought I was looking for a career guide, and I actually picked up a book that was more of a coaching, kind of find yourself type of a guide by, Martha Beck. I don't know if you know Martha Beck. She's quite amazing.
I just read about her in your did you reference her in the book?
Probably,
Yeah.
'cause she was a big influence. But I took her course thinking it was gonna help me, because it was mindset. It was all about, um, looking at how you're thinking. It was all about looking at gratitude. It was all about looking at all this stuff that I hadn't really ever been exposed to before. And it was amazing, and it changed my life. And that's when I made the pivot of like, "Oh, I've gotta teach this to other
What
people."
had your mindset been, um, up until that point? Like, how were you dealing with all of this emotionally?
Um, I mean, I I think it's I was always like, from a child, like, I think I was born into being pretty rebellious, pretty like, I don't like authority. I've never really loved that. And that followed me into my 20s, and I think that really actually helped me a lot because one of the things that happens when you're diagnosed with anything, or I think even if you think you're having, you have something going on with your body, maybe you don't have a diagnosis, but you're starting to look up symptoms, you're starting to think of what is this that I have? Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. You tend to be thrown into this deficit model of healing, which is you can no longer do this. You can no longer do that. You can't stay away from this. This is bad. Oh, is this what you've been doing? You've been doing that wrong. It's just a whole world of that. And I remember specifically having a nurse come in when I was in the hospital when I was first diagnosed, and I was all hopped up on steroids, which is not a great time to be to be angry and, being challenged by people. So I'm sure she got a mouthful, but, um, but I just remember her saying things like, "Well, you can no longer take hot showers, you can no longer stress yourself
Okay.
out, you can no longer do this, you can no longer do that," and it yes, some people with MS can have a problem with heat, that can be common, but not everybody. And yes, there are other things that are common with chronic pain or with fibromyalgia or with lupus or whatever it is, but it doesn't mean everyone has it. But
Right.
automatically, all of these things are being thrown at you as if you do.
Right.
And I just remember like that was like the first and final straw for me when she sat me down and said, "You can't have hot showers anymore." Because immediately I was like, "That's ridiculous." Like I took one last night, like literally, I took one less than 24 hours ago and I was fine. And it doesn't, so I immediately was like, "You don't know what you're talking about. I'm going to have to figure this out." And thankfully, my neurologist still is amazing, but he was amazing and he was not like that. But I kind of went against everything, I went full force against this deficit model of what you can't do, and I immediately just tried to start proving things right, like, what can I do? And that's but I didn't necessarily do it going back to the mindset, I wasn't necessarily doing it at that point from, like, this gratitude place of peace. I was
Mm.
doing it from, like, the, "I'll
Yeah.
show you,"
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
"You can't tell
Exactly.
me," kind of kind of a way, and I mean, I hustled it. I hustled my way through it. I fought my way. Um, yeah, I took it on. I took it
Because
on.
I think a lot of us, well, I shouldn't generalize for everybody. I'll say
Mhm,
for myself. I think, when I was younger, I used to put a lot of merit into everything a doctor would tell me, everything,
mhm,
no showers, this, that, the other thing. And I would take it as gospel. And while I still have a tremendous respect for the medical
mhm,
community, I have learned in living with my conditions for several decades that
mhm,
not everything is cut and dry. Like you said, not everything means everybody will have it. So
mhm.
there's I think a fine line with respecting, the medical community and also putting some things into question, right? Because
Yeah,
if we do everything, if automatically followed what that nurse or doctor had been telling you, you wouldn't be taking hot showers, you wouldn't be doing all of these things, right?
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm the same way. I've always I mean, from day one, I have been on medicine. I have done a holistic approach. I've done everything. I think both approaches have a lot of merit, and I was lucky that my neurologist, my MS specialist, was cutting edge. He was ahead of his time, and I respected and listened to everything. But you don't get a lot of time with the
Right.
MS specialists and the neurologists, and you do get a lot of time with other people, and you get a whole lot of time with the internet telling you what you can't do. And so
Yeah.
and so I was yeah, for a little bit, I was just going, you know, whole hog against it, and that's what I needed at that point. That's what helped me. It wasn't necessarily sustainable, but it sure helped me in the beginning.
And now you're helping thousands and thousands of of people. Before I let it go too long, I want to field some of these comments here.
Mhm.
Hi, Jane. Glad you found us too. Linda, thank you with the shirt you gave me. Thank you, Linda. We have been waiting very patiently for this broadcast tonight. Thanks, Suzanne. Glad you're here. I have been sharing with people in the group how excited I was for tonight. Hi, Mary. Glad you are here. All right. So hashtag gratitude will give you, put hashtag gratitude in the comments, and Andrea is giving away a 2-for-1 deal. Signed copies of both of her books, Live Your Life, Not Your Diagnosis, and Stop Carrying the Weight of Your MS, which is very generous. Thank you for offering that. So all you have to do, gang, is just put a hashtag gratitude in the comments. Lot of love for George. Glad you guys like George. I'm doing a vlog post with outtakes, my favorite outtakes of his, so you'll have to look out for that. Hi, Jill. Glad you're here. The book title feels like a permission slip. Good way to
Oh, I love that.
Good way. The contents, let me tell you, the contents are like that way too. It is a permission slip to live your life. I was telling Andrea that I'm kind of picky when it comes to books like this, and this is not your standard. It's not all the same stuff that you read. It really is what the title says about living your life and not your diagnosis. Yeah, sorry for your loss. I am too. I'm very sorry to hear about your dad.
Thank you.
Taking away the brick of finance and adding the brick of coaching seems lighter and very rewarding. I like that. All right, so let's get back to that. So you're questioning things, and then you're doing a pivot. You pivoted from finance, and then where did you go?
So that's when I sometimes I like doing everything at once. I don't know about you, but it's like I left my job, I left finance, I started my coaching business, I got married, and I moved just all at once.
Right.
Just
May as well.
why not? Just rip that Band-Aid right on off. So I started, I dove in. I had no idea what I was doing at all. I just knew that it felt right. And just talking with people about what I was doing, I pretty quickly people were saying, "Okay, you have to help people with MS." And at first I got to tell you, I wasn't sure that was what I wanted to do because of what we talked about where I knew that it was such this deficit model of what people were exposed to, and I knew I was not like that, and I was not at all gonna promote that, and so I was like, "I don't wanna start working for people or representing, these huge nonprofits
Right.
on something that I don't
A lot of
feel."
responsibility, right?
It's a
Yeah.
lot of responsibility. These are their people, and I was like, "I'm not gonna talk about what they can't do. I'm not gonna do that." And so I went in because they had a coach that was like a career coach, that was leaving, and I was like, "Sure, I can do career coaching. Why not?" And I thought I was gonna be, helping them with writing accommodations, talking to their boss about what they need, or maybe, writing their resume, things like that. And I very quickly realized that the main question that people had that they really wanted to work on was this idea of who am I now that I have this
Mm,
diagnosis? Because quite a few of them were relatively newly diagnosed, and I had had it, probably 5, 6 years by that point, and I loved it. I loved helping people look at like, okay, I am a different person now just because of this new thing that's, this huge thing that's happened to me. But I want a say in who I am. I don't want to just give up. I don't want to just give in and start thinking I'm the person who can't do anything anymore. They wanted something that was a lot more empowering. And that's what really hooked me. And that's when I started doing more of that work. And then they approached me to do this positive psychology. And I loved that.
yeah.
I was a psych major in undergrad. And so I've always loved that stuff. So I just kind of fell into it.
And it sounds like you fell into it exactly the right way that you were supposed to fall into it. It was on your terms, but but also you said it felt right when you did all of those things, and then you fell into it and helping people. I mean, we do experience so many losses, and I like the deficit model. Is that what you're? I love that. That's so true.
Yeah.
We feel like we often lose our jobs. Some of us lose spouses and friends and abilities and hobbies. There's a lot of loss. So, prior to, me having like my Lauren 2.0 moment 9 years ago, I
Yeah.
thought, who am I? I think my self was tied up in things that I did and not who I was. And it's taken me years to
Mm.
kind of find out who that person is. And I'm not an occupation or things like that. I'm just
Yeah.
me. And so I'm constantly crafting and figuring out who I am. But I think that is a huge question, Andrea, is who am I now that I have,
Mhm.
this diagnosis?
Yeah. Yeah, it can play into so many things, because you're right. I think a lot of people, we don't really think about it. And so until for me, because I had to go through this work. I think it's part of having this huge change in your body or having a diagnosis. You have to go through this. It's almost like it's like a grieving, but then kind of an understanding of like, what is my new role? What is my new identity? And until then, I was like, oh, well, I'm a student.
Right.
I'm a this, I'm a girlfriend, I'm a that. And then I realized, like, okay, not only do I not know who I am right now, but that's not who I was back then.
Right.
And so, and so for me, it was like doing it for the first time. And there's all these questions of how much should your illness play a role in that new identity? How much do you want it to play a role? Because you look at the the people that have chronic illness, and there's so many different, I don't know what the word would be. Like, some people are all about their illness, and some
Right.
people don't want to ever talk about it again,
Right.
and everything in between. And so it's really your choice of like, where do I want this to go? And how much do I want to talk about it? And I didn't want to talk. It's not that I was in denial. I mean, I was treating it, I was doing all sorts of things. I just didn't want to talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
And then I went into coaching and working with MS. And then I wrote this book, and I was like, oh, well, I'm talking about it. That's not, and then I had to step away. I mean, a couple of years ago, during the pandemic, actually, I stepped away. I was like, I need to just take a moment and step back. And I helped people with kind of the same things that I helped people when I was working with MS, was understanding like, who am I? Who do I want to be? What that led into was kind of the core of what I do now, which is, how are you talking to yourself? What is that internal dialogue? What is that? Um, are you mean to yourself? How are you treating yourself? How do you support yourself?
You have an entire chapter about that.
I know. Yeah. And
I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to ask you
oh,
about
sure.
that. No, just
Yeah.
keep
But I
going.
love it.
The
And
internal dialogue we have with ourselves.
it's everything. I
Yeah.
really think it's everything. And so I was able to step back from being MS specific and just worked with that. And then I realized, actually, really, it was after my father passed. I didn't do anything. I just kind of cocooned and um, came out of it. And I realized, like, I got to get back into, like, I've got to do what I've always wanted to do, which is look at I don't know what the opposite would be, but that non-deficit model. Like, let's look at everything that you can do when you have a diagnosis. Let's look at all these people that I know are doing amazing things, like you and other people that, we both talk to, are
Yeah.
doing these great things, and yet somehow don't necessarily feel like they want to trumpet it or talk about it in that way, because it's um it's not necessarily the focus of, and I realized, I'm like, that's what I wanted to do, and that's when I came back to it. But there's just been a lot of pivoting. I'm very comfortable with
Yeah.
pivots.
Pivots are good. If it's
Love
when
it.
we're not able to pivot that we can get into
Mhm.
trouble, right? When we're so regimented against
Yeah.
change that that's especially living with a chronic illness with its ebbs and flows.
Mhm.
We're constantly having to pivot, and so you can surf the waves or you can let them crash down on you.
Yes.
And surfing is a lot easier way for me to live anyway.
Mhm.
So there was something you just said that I wanted to touch on, and now I don't remember what it was. But prior to the pivot, what were we talking about? So you were coaching. Oh, you got out of wanting to talk about it. Oh, I know what it was. So you mentioned like how people grappling with how much do you let it define you and how much do you not.
Mhm.
When people come into my group, Attitude of Gratitude with Chronic Pain, for many, it's a very large learning curve because we're very different from other groups and
Mhm.
not trying to knock other groups because they're really important. They're just
Sure, yeah.
different. My group, are not allowed to talk about the specifics of your condition. We have live chats twice a week where you can, because that is important. We have to do that. But in the group itself, we serve a very unique niche, and so people come in knowing that. But for many that are so used to comparing blood results and stuff, it can be a learning curve. Or for people that
Yeah.
are used to always talking about their illness. I know there's no right and wrong way to do anything. Everybody needs to do them, but how do you balance that? What would you recommend to your clients, as far as finding a healthy balance?
I think a lot of it depends on I think there's 2 things that it depends on. I think it depends on where you are in just your journey of healing, and that doesn't necessarily, um, always coincide with when you're diagnosed or when you develop something. I It takes some time to process and to, figure things out, and like I said before, there's a grief to it because you've kinda lost who you used to be or who you thought you used to be, and it's very sudden, often, and that takes a while. And I think a lot of times when you're going through that and when you're processing it, for some people, talking about it really helps. And I think there's nothing wrong with that.
Does It's powerful hearing
Yeah.
somebody else say me too, and hearing
Mhm.
somebody else that with your same illness. Even it's very powerful. There's a lot of
Yes.
healing in that.
Yeah, yeah. But then I think there's a time period where and, like you said, like, there's no right or wrong. There's no, like, this is where you should be. I'm not saying any of that, but there's a time where you do get over that grief, that trauma, that initial shock that needs processing, and then you start to look around and you start thinking, "Okay, what's next?"
Right.
And that's where I wanna come in. That's where it sounds like you come in, where you're like, "Hey, let's continue and look at this," because you don't have to just drop off and no longer have any help. Like, there's
Right.
still places to go, but in that part of it, you don't necessarily need to talk about it so much because you have processed it, and you don't, it's not that you're ignoring it, it's just that it's not so top of mind and other things have moved in to the foreground again.
Right.
Um, and I think that's one part of it, and I think the other part is sometimes and I actually think it's kind of a fascinating part of dealing with any kind of emotional like, any kind of emotional support. You've got these support groups and things like that. There have been these studies about where if you are in a support group, there's a time that it's really good, but then there's a time that it kind of gets stale, and you can stay in it and just kind of almost like re-injure yourself and re-injure yourself and re-injure yourself because you're it's almost like your soul wants to move on, your mind is ready to move on, but there's part of you that's like, "No, I wanna stay, I wanna
Picking
continue
at the
talking."
scab. Right. You're
Yes.
picking at the scab of healing, and
Exactly,
yeah.
and that type of a thing can happen too, and sometimes people can get stuck because they don't necessarily know how to move on, and again, getting back to this model where I think that there's a absolute place for this, and I think that, thank goodness for our medical people and our nurses and our social workers and all of those people that help us through this initial diagnosis, this initial trauma, this is initial everything, but it's almost like you don't know where to go
Yeah.
afterwards, and so you can get stuck in that, and so then that's when it kind of starts to become your who you are, is stuck in this cycle of trauma and hurt, and it's not necessarily it just kinda keeps you there, and they've had interesting studies with, chronic pain that actually show that that type of a thing, chronic or constantly talking about it and talking about it every single day actually keeps you on pain, because there's a lot of
Mm.
pain that actually lives in your brain.
Right.
And actually not answering the question of like, how much pain are you in today,
Right.
can be helpful. And so it's really interesting. So I think it's just
Interesting.
a
Yeah.
combination. Yeah, it's a combination of what where are you in that journey? Are you at a place where you really do need to heal yourself and talk about it? And then it is going to be a little bit more of who you are. It's going to be a little bit more of your identity because you're working through it. And how much are you ready to move on and have a new identity? And are you in that stale identity and just not necessarily sure how to move out of it? And that's where things, I think, like, I mean, that's where gratitude plays a huge part, I think, in moving away from that identity. When you feel like you're ready and you're not quite sure how to do that, gratitude can be a great stepping stone.
Agreed.
Mhm.
That's such a great way to think about it. I've never really thought about it that way. That we're not really sure where to go from there. You know, you're not living your best life, or maybe you're not living your best life. I was not. And where do you go from here? Because I do have my condition and I am in pain. Where do I go from there? That's such a question. Often we don't know where else to go because we're not, I don't want to hang around with the healthy people all the time because they don't necessarily understand where we're coming from. Hopefully you've got friends and they do, but I mean, but you also want to stay stuck in that whole, talking about our pain levels all the time. So that is a really interesting way to look at it.
Mhm.
And I always tell people, one of my little jokes is people aren't getting diagnosed and the next day running out to join a gratitude group. They're just not.
No, because they're not ready.
No, everybody heals at their own time frame, and
Mhm.
does it on their own time. But
Yeah.
it can be really difficult to get unstuck, and that
Yeah.
place of acceptance. That's a tough pill to swallow. Pun totally intended there. But
Yeah.
that's a tough pill to swallow. That acceptance, because I think people think it's giving our illnesses permission to have us, and really it's
Ooh, yeah.
just, in my opinion, actually, really, it's just accepting the way things are right now. It doesn't mean I have to like it, but I have to accept it, and that way I can move forward.
I agree. I think there's a lot of power and there's a lot of control in acceptance. But you're right. I think a lot of people think it's, you're just submitting
Right.
to your diagnosis or your illness, and it's not. It's I think there's also, can be guilt that can happen, because it's almost like you're leaving, or you can feel like you're leaving some people behind, or you don't want to. I know that was one of the huge hurdles, when I was working with people. When I was like 6 years into it. I still had my, certainly my, I mean, my issues. They've never stopped, but, um, I've always had an invisible illness. You to look at me, you would have no idea, and you've never would have known.
Right.
Um, and I would always feel a little bit guilty when I was working with people who were, were having a really difficult time, or had a lot of hardships, or had other diagnoses on top of it. And I felt guilty, and like sometimes I felt like I was doing something wrong to even be talking about
Hmm.
gratitude and focusing on something other than my illness. Even though you're not forgetting it, you're focusing on what's next, on other parts of your life. And I felt like, should I be doing this? Am I throwing it in the face of other people? And I think it's,
I feel that often.
yeah.
I do feel that same thing quite often.
Yeah, it's
Um,
difficult. It took me a long time to reconcile that, because you don't wanna hurt people. You don't want to do
right.
anything that's gonna
Mhm.
offend people, but at the same time, you don't wanna tamp yourself down or
Right.
stop your own progress just because other people might not be doing the same thing. But
Right. And we
yeah,
fought hard to get, here. And but
yeah,
there are times where my illnesses are invisible, and there are times where they're very visible. So, you know, half dozen of one, six, what is
yeah.
it? You know what
6
I
of
mean?
1, yeah, 6
Yeah,
of
that's
1,
it.
doesn't
That's
it?
it. Um, but yeah, and guilt. I mean, I, like I said before we started airing, I already want to have you on 5 more times, but
Done.
you mentioned guilt.
Mhm.
There's so much guilt that we can have when living with chronic conditions. You touched on one of them, but there's so much guilt that we put on ourselves and that we think others put on us, and that isn't necessarily fact. Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I think as having a chronic illness, there's guilt that we're not doing enough. It's
Right.
almost like we can take this ableist type of a idea and force it on ourselves. Like we should be doing more. We should have more energy. We should be able to do all these things that other people in our lives that don't
We
have a
should
chronic
on
illness
ourselves.
should
Right.
all
Yeah.
over ourselves,
Yeah.
just all over.
Yeah.
And so and it feels, yeah, like, am I being a good enough spouse? Am I being a good enough student? Am I being a good enough, employee or whatever it is? And there's a lot of guilt about that. I also think as women, we put a lot of guilt on ourselves. We put a lot of expectations that are, even if we didn't have a chronic illness, would be completely outlandish. And I think there's this idea of what other people are thinking
Yeah.
about us, which tends to be a projection
Right.
anyway. So we think other people think that we're not doing enough or that we're lazy or whatever it is. And, uh, y whether or not they're thinking that, they're probably not,
Probably
but,
not. Yeah.
it's a lot. We can really feel a lot of guilt about what we can do, what we can't do, what we should be doing, what other people think we should be doing. It's
Sometimes we're no longer able to contribute financially to the household. We're
Mhm.
losing
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
there's a lot of guilt. And like you said,
So much.
I should be able to do this. I'm only 32 years old. I should be able to do 3 loads of laundry today.
Mhm.
Um, I'm not 32 years old, by the way, but in case anybody was confused about that.
Look, I'm 25, you're 32. It's
But we
fine.
do have there's a lot of things like that that we put on ourselves.
Mhm.
How would you how can we get over that other than doing a lot of personal growth, work and gratitude? Of course, I always come back to the baseline
Mm.
of the gift of perspective and appreciation can really help us to see, for me at least, it helps me see things more clearly as to what they really are and not what I'm projecting, like you said.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's a huge thing. I mean, I would say that's a huge part of that foundation, 100%. I think another part of it can be realizing that projection and taking it to yourself. So for me, something that's really was really healing for me personally, and when I was working with clients is we tend to have it where it's like, well, she thinks this, my boss thinks this, my partner thinks this, and it's all about like all these other people putting stuff on us.
Right.
Realizing that it is whether or not they think that doesn't matter because we'll never know. But looking at us thinking we that they think that is a projection, and to bring it, I say, like, bring it home. Just bring it home and look at what you're
Mhm.
thinking.
Right.
And so if you think, Sally thinks I'm lazy, flip it around. Like, no, you know what? I actually think I'm lazy.
Right.
I'm actually telling myself, and whether or not you believe it 100% or not, that's not the point. The point is you're telling yourself that you're lazy. And my boss thinks I can't do this. My boss thinks I'm not working hard enough. Let's flip it around. Like, no, I'm telling myself that I'm not working hard enough. I'm telling myself that I'm not good enough or I'm not earning something. I'm telling myself that I should be earning more money and taking advantage of my partner. And when you take ownership of those things and you start to realize like, oh, this is me telling myself these things all day long,
Yeah.
then all of a sudden you realize how much, and I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it just happens immediately, but you realize how much control you have over that internal dialogue. And you realize like, no, this is coming from inside the house, as one
It's so
says.
interesting. And
Yeah.
you actually have you talked to a client here in this book, which we hardly even touched on, although a lot of the things we're talking about tonight are in your wonderful book. But you're talking to a client, Stacy, I think her name is, and I forget what she was sharing with you about. Oh, she was afraid for to go on a new medication. I know you
Mm,
wrote the book a while ago. Afraid to go on the new medication, and so you kept asking her what would happen if
mhm.
it didn't, if it didn't sit well with you. Well, I could be sick, I could be out of work, and
Yeah.
then I could lose my job. And
Be in
you
a van down by the river. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
you talk about we're all afraid of being a bag lady. You actually say that here in the book, but it's true. This internal dialogue is more powerful than really I realized up until
So,
recently.
so powerful. Yeah. It is. Like, we can spiral if we let because it tends to be and I think you actually talked about this when we were talking on my podcast, our minds tend to go towards the negative
Yeah.
because that's just natural. We're human. And at the end of the day, we wanna survive, and we are not that far away from the caveman where survival meant looking for danger and making sure that the danger didn't happen, which in today's world means you're looking for the negative. And so there's part of our brains that kinda go there automatically, and if we don't manage them, if we don't on purpose look for things like gratitude or look for things like, let's really look at how we're talking to ourselves, let's really looking at this internal dialogue, these thoughts can just go on autopilot, and when thoughts go on autopilot, they tend to spiral towards the negative.
Yeah.
And if you couple that with something that is a very real fear, which is, I'm on a new medication, I don't know what's going to happen. It could be bad. I could have a reaction. Maybe, I can't remember if she had had a reaction before, but pairing it with a very real threat can just spiral. And when
Yeah.
that happens, it affects how you act. So maybe you don't take these medications that are working. Maybe you don't do the PT that really helps you. Maybe you don't do the meditation. You don't do the gratitude journals. You don't do things that help because you're afraid that this big bad thing is going to happen and you kind of go into fight or flight.
Which is a way you reference this in the book too. I think it's a really a way of protecting. We think we're
Mhm,
protecting ourselves, right?
mhm.
It's self-protection when we're doing that.
Totally.
Well, gosh, gang, we're already over the hour. I
Oh my
can't
gosh.
believe it, and we have to give away a book. But before we stop, though, and I'm sorry I didn't get to more of your comments,
Oh,
but I wanted to touch on this one. Jane, just starting this journey of diagnosis. Jane, I honor you. I'm glad that you're here. I hope that you heard something tonight that was useful
mhm.
for you. And please keep watching. I'm really, really glad that you're here. What would be your, you know, advice for people that are just getting started on this journey of diagnosis?
I think first and foremost, just be gentle with
That's good
yourself.
advice.
Just be gentle. We talked about shooting on yourselves. We talked about you're in a whole new world, just a whole new world. And it's a lot. It's overwhelming. It's a lot of people saying a lot of different things. Like we talked about, it can tend to be this deficit model of all these things you can't do, and maybe all these other things that people say you should do that sound weird and might not even work. I don't know. I mean, there's crazy things that people think you should do.
Yeah,
Um, and it can be a lot. It's a culture shock, I think, in a way. And I think my my best advice, and I'm not saying I at all followed it or knew about it when I was first diagnosed, but is just be gentle. Let yourself freak out, let yourself have tantrums, let yourself cry, let yourself feel okay, let yourself forget about it for a little bit, let yourself be right, let yourself try and fail different things.
that's great.
Just yeah,
Be gentle. Trust
be
yourself.
gentle.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's great advice. Let's give away your books.
Great.
Let's see if this works. Here we go. Good luck, everybody. Um, there we go. Oh, I should have said, yeah, hopefully everybody here is living in the United States. I should have said that.
Yeah.
Dean Brokeman, congratulations,
Yay!
Dean. If you can please message me and give me your address, we will be sure to get those out to you. Congratulations. You will love, love, love these books. So, and you've got a podcast, which I was on. Will you please come back?
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Good, because with so much we didn't even get a chance to talk about. But just for now, gang, it's AndreaHansonCoaching.com.
Mhm.
If you look in the show notes, you will find, you can find out about her books. Her podcast is also called Live Your Life, Not Your Diagnosis. My episode, I think, is coming up at the end of August. You said?
Yes, the 29th, I think.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. You are amazing
Thank
to talk
you.
to. And I have so much more that I know the audience wants to hear from you too. So
Look, it was so much fun. It was such an honor to come and talk to your audience. I'm happy to answer questions, even if you get them afterwards.
great.
I mean, like you said, like I love that. Yeah, I have a new friend, and it's just so much fun always to just sit and talk. And it felt like it was about 5 minutes. So
It did. They always go fast. This one was really fast. I, all of
yeah,
a sudden I looked at the clock. I'm like, no, it can't be. It can't be.
I know.
Thank you so much for being here, Andrea. You
Thank
really, you
you.
are a gift to the chronic pain and illness community and the world for that matter. But people like you who give of yourself to help others who are struggling like this really make a big difference. So thank you for being here with us tonight.
Thank you so much.
All right, gang, I will see you next week. Peace and love. Get your gratitude on. And let's see if I do the closing. I usually forget to do the closing. Let's see. All right, bye, gang. See you next week.